Tiffany Henyard's tenure as mayor of Dalton, Illinois, began with historic optimism. As the town's first female mayor, her election was heralded as a turning point for a predominantly black community of 20,000, an emblem of progress and the promise of transformative leadership. But that promise has since unraveled. What began as a hopeful new chapter has spiraled into controversy, scandal, and a growing crisis of governance that now threatens the very fabric of Dalton's institutions. At the heart of this turmoil is Henyard herself. Her administration has faced allegations of corruption, financial mismanagement, and the dangerous consolidation of power. Critics argue her leadership style favors control over collaboration, loyalty over legality, and spectacle over substance. One of the defining moments of her controversial mayoralty came in September, when she unilaterally appointed Burge as Dalton's police chief. The decision drew immediate backlash, not just for bypassing the required approval of the village board, but because Burge lacked the legal qualifications to serve according to the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board. Burge had failed to complete the mandatory training and certification necessary to perform basic police duties, let alone lead an entire department. However, Henyard refused to rescind the appointment, deepening perceptions that her administration was more concerned with personal allegiance than professional standards. The move sent shockwaves in a town already grappling with public safety concerns. Residents reported delayed emergency responses and rising crime. The Burge appointment quickly became a symbol of deeper dysfunction. A government with no checks, no balance, and no accountability. The controversy didn't end there. Henyard has also been accused of severe financial mismanagement, including the alleged misuse of public funds for personal luxury. Investigations revealed over $171,000 in travel-related expenses and more than $48,000 in Amazon purchases charged to village credit cards, items that appeared far from essential to municipal operations. These included electronics, high-end consumer goods, and other personal luxuries, once boasting a $45 million surplus. In 2022, Dalton's finances have since nosedived. By mid-2024, the village reported a $5.68 million deficit. Even more alarming, over $3 million in American Rescue Plan funds remain unaccounted for, a potential violation of federal guidelines that could trigger legal consequences. As essential services suffer, Henyard's fiscal decisions have raised serious red flags and fueled public outrage. Adding to the tension is Henyard's increasingly combative and theatrical public image. She has reportedly used village police as a personal security detail, blurring the line between public duty and personal protection. Her public appearances, often marked by flashy outfits and a defiant tone, have drawn criticism for resembling a character from a gangster film more than a public servant. To many residents, her behavior feels less like leadership and more like mockery in the eyes of critics. Dalton's government under Henyard has become unrecognizable, defined by secrecy, favoritism, and disregard for institutional norms. What was once a story of progress has become a cautionary tale. As investigations deepen and public trust continues to erode, Tiffany Henyard now stands not as a symbol of hope, but at the center of a full-blown governance crisis. What once felt like headline-grabbing milestones in Dalton, Illinois, have now become enduring symbols of chaos. Mayor Tiffany Henyard's bold public displays and fiery speeches, once hailed as refreshing and assertive, have for many become distractions, political theater, masking a village in crisis. Beneath the surface spectacle lies a town battling crumbling infrastructure, deepening poverty, and stalled economic progress. The drama surrounding Henyard's administration no longer captivates. It exhausts, leaving residents feeling abandoned and disillusioned from the beginning. Henyard's rise was seen as historic. As Dalton's first female mayor, she embodied change and broke barriers in predominantly black suburbs south of Chicago. But that sense of progress has since unraveled into widespread disillusionment. Her leadership, once filled with promise, now stands at the center of a storm defined by accusations of corruption, financial misconduct, and unchecked authority. And perhaps no decision captured this more clearly than her appointment of Burge as police chief, a move made without consulting the village board and in defiance of state law. According to the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board, Burge lacked the legal certification to hold any policing position. Without proper training, he was not authorized to perform basic duties, let alone lead a department. Henyard's refusal to rescind the appointment, even after these violations became public, ignited a firestorm. For many residents, this was no longer just a bad decision. It was a glaring example of the mayor prioritizing personal loyalty over legality and community safety. But Burge's appointment was not an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern of unilateral decision-making that has come to define Henyard's time in office. Her continued refusal to adhere to board protocols has driven a deep wedge between her administration and the elected officials meant to serve alongside her. Frustrated by her defiance, the Dalton Village Board passed a resolution calling for a federal investigation into her conduct. Board trustees publicly accused Henyard of corruption and gross mismanagement, warning that her style of governance had made effective collaboration nearly impossible. Outside agencies soon took notice. Reports emerged that the FBI had issued subpoenas for employee and business records from Dalton Village Hall, indicating a potential expansion of investigations into corruption and misuse of public funds. The legal consequences Henyard once dismissed as politically motivated are no longer hypothetical. They may be imminent despite the mounting scrutiny. Henyard continues to deny all allegations, characterizing them as part of a partisan smear campaign. But for many in Dalton, the time for deflection has passed. The frustrations are no longer theoretical. Delays in emergency response, broken roads, underfunded schools, and stalled development plans have become daily realities. Residents are not just watching a scandal unfold. They are living the consequences of a government adrift. Even some of Henyard's early supporters now struggle to defend her. The idealism that once surrounded her campaign has faded. What began as a story of representation and reform has turned into a bitter cautionary tale, one of missed opportunities and eroded trust. Political infighting has brought village progress to a near standstill. And with federal and state investigations intensifying, the future of Henyard's leadership and of Dalton itself hangs in the balance. The controversial appointment of Burge, once viewed as an isolated controversy, now appears as part of a broader crisis when Henyard bypassed the village board to make the appointment. A judge later issued a restraining order to block Burge from taking office until proper procedures were followed, but rather than reconsider, Henyard doubled down. She portrayed herself as the victim of politically motivated attacks and refused to acknowledge the legal and institutional violations her actions represented to her critics. This was a stand on principle. It was a consolidation of power. The police department, they argued, was no longer being led. It was being politicized. And each time the board or judiciary intervened, Henyard responded with defiance, further isolating herself from both officials and constituents. What was once a strength now reads as intransigence. Her public appearances, often theatrical and confrontational, have done little to restore confidence. With village police reportedly serving as her personal security detail, the line between public resources and personal protection has grown dangerously blurred. Her flamboyant fashion choices and dramatic addresses, compared by some characters from gangster films, have fueled perceptions of a leader more concerned with image than impact. Meanwhile, the town's financial health has deteriorated sharply. Once operating with a $45 million surplus in 2022, Dalton is now in a $5.68 million deficit. Audits have revealed more than $171,000 in travel expenses and over $48,000 in Amazon purchases charged to village credit cards, many of which appear unrelated to official business. The most damning financial lapse may be the mishandling of over $3 million in Federal American Rescue Plan funds, which were either misallocated or unaccounted for, putting the village in potential violation of federal law. State and federal agencies, including the Illinois Attorney General's office and the FBI, have reportedly widened their probes. With each new revelation, questionable appointments, financial irregularities, disregard for governance procedures, public trust erodes further. Faith in Henyard's leadership is nearing collapse for Dalton residents. The crisis is no longer just about politics. It's about lived experience. Waiting longer for police, seeing streets deteriorate, watching development projects stall. It's about the hollowing out of civic life. People are no longer asking for answers. They are demanding them. Calls for transparency, accountability, and real change are growing louder by the day. What began as a celebrated milestone in Dalton's history has devolved into a governance crisis marked by scandal and dysfunction. Henyard's administration now faces not only political pressure, but potential legal reckoning. Her legacy, once poised to be one of progress and representation, now teeters on the edge of collapse. The question that looms over Dalton is no longer whether change is needed, but whether Henyard is capable of delivering it. Dalton in crisis. Mayor Tiffany Henyard at crossroads. Mayor Tiffany Henyard now stands at a critical crossroads. With the village's future hanging in the balance, residents are asking the hard question. Asterisk, is she capable of leading Dalton back on the brink? Or will her continued presence only drive the town deeper into dysfunction? What began as a historic milestone, the election of Dalton's first female mayor, has unraveled into a deeply divisive administration defined by scandal, resistance to oversight, and a long trail of avoidable mistakes. The Ronald Burge controversy, while explosive in its own right, is just one chapter in a much larger and more troubling narrative. It reflects a broader dysfunction that has plagued Henyard's tenure from the start, a pattern of governance that prioritizes personal loyalty over qualifications and spectacle over substance. Dalton residents, many of whom once believed in Henyard's promises of reform, now find themselves caught in a political storm with no clear path forward. A once hopeful vision has devolved into confusion, conflict, and chaos as investigations mount. So do the questions. Asterisk, can the town heal? Can trust be restored? Or has the damage already gone too far? Asterisk, despite increasing pressure, Henyard remains determined to stay in power. But her refusal to acknowledge mistakes or adjust course has only intensified tensions. Village board meetings have devolved into battlegrounds, marked by heated exchanges, walkouts, and a community that feels increasingly unheard in a temporary ruling. The courts allowed Burge to serve as interim police chief for 30 days, while the board searched for a permanent replacement. Even this short-lived appointment sparked fierce backlash. Burge lacked the certification and training required under Illinois law, a fact critics said was ignored to serve Henyard's political interests. To them, Burge wasn't hired to protect Dalton. He was installed to protect Henyard. That decision, they argue, fits a broader trend. An administration that rewards loyalty over merit and governs not with service in mind, but with self-preservation at the forefront. As the Burge controversy escalated, more allegations surfaced: misused public funds, lavish travel, luxury purchases on village credit cards, and improper use of municipal staff for personal errands. The pattern was clear. One scandal after another, all under Henyard watched. Dalton, already reeling from underfunded services, rising crime, and a shrinking economy, now faces a full-blown leadership crisis. The town's problems aren't just mounting. They're multiplying. Even some of Henyard's former allies have begun to distance themselves, publicly voicing concerns over her judgment and decision-making. But rather than accept accountability, Henyard has doubled down, dismissing critics as enemies, intensifying her rhetoric, and shifting blame away from her office. This refusal to accept responsibility has widened the political divide in Dalton, destabilizing an already fragile government and leaving many residents questioning whether any hope remains for effective leadership. The Burge appointment was not a one-off mistake. It was a symptom of something deeper, the kind of systemic failure that doesn't just erode public trust, but destroys it. For many in Dalton, it was a final straw. With multiple investigations underway and trust in local government at an all-time low, the town is at a tipping point. Whether it can recover from the damage remains uncertain. But one thing is clear: the people of Dalton are demanding change. They want transparency. They want accountability. And more than anything, they want leadership that puts the community first. Tiffany Henyard, under mounting scrutiny, Mayor Henyard's administration has reached a boiling point. Her style of leadership, marked by unilateral decisions, controversial appointments, and unchecked spending, is now under intense scrutiny from both residents and investigators. From bypassing governance processes to facing accusations of misusing public resources for personal benefit, Henyard is at the center of a storm that grows stronger by the day. Federal investigators are now poring over her financial records and allegations of abuse of village assets. Meanwhile, Dalton continues to grapple with rising crime, deteriorating infrastructure, and a stagnant economy. Many residents argue their mayor is too focused on political survival to address the town's pressing needs. At the heart of the uproar is Henyard's appointment of Ronald Burge as police chief, a move that not only violated state law but also ignored the authority of the village board. Burge lacked the legal qualifications to serve as a law enforcement officer in Illinois. A court blocked the appointment, but Henyard refused to back down. She framed the backlash as a partisan attack. To many, that defense rang hollow. Instead, it appeared as another attempt to deflect from poor judgment. The criticism has grown sharper. One resident likened her inner circle politics to the tactics of a mob boss. An extreme analogy, perhaps, but it speaks volumes about the deepening public distrust. Burge is not an isolated case. Henyard has a history of placing loyalists, some with questionable backgrounds, in key positions. These decisions have raised serious concerns about transparency, competence, and the direction of local government at a time when strong leadership is most needed. Dalton now stands at a pivotal moment. The outcome of ongoing investigations in the next election could determine whether the town finds its way out of crisis or slips even further into dysfunction. Dalton under siege. The fallout of the Burge appointment, the political firestorm in Dalton, Illinois, continues to intensify as Mayor Tiffany Henyard's controversial leadership draws unprecedented scrutiny. Her appointment of Ronald Burge as police chief, despite legal disqualifications and community opposition, has rocked the town to its core and exposed deeper structural failures within the village government. But Burge is not an isolated case. Henyard has a well-documented pattern of installing close allies, some with troubling backgrounds, into powerful village roles, including within the police force. These appointments have fueled public outrage and raised urgent questions about competence, transparency, and the true motivations behind her decision-making. At a time when Dalton desperately needs steady, capable leadership, residents say they've gotten the opposite. The Burge scandal, in particular, has only widened the chasm between Henyard and the community. Before his appointment in Dalton, Burge held law enforcement roles in nearby towns like Dixmoor and Harvey, municipalities where his conduct was already under fire. In those previous roles, Burge was named in at least 4 lawsuits, including cases alleging political retaliation and employment misconduct. For many in Dalton, his appointment was more than questionable. It was baffling why. Residents asked, would Mayor Henyard choose someone with such a controversial record to lead one of Dalton's most critical departments? The answer, critics argue, lies not in Burge's qualifications but in his loyalty. They see his appointment as part of a broader strategy by Henyard to consolidate power, surrounding herself with loyalists willing to protect her political interests at any cost. In their view, Burge wasn't hired to safeguard Dalton. He was hired to shield Henyard despite the legal barriers. Henyard has remained defiantly committed to Burge's appointment. According to the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board, ILETS, Burge was legally unqualified to serve as a police officer in the state. He lacked the required certification, a fact that made his appointment not just improper, but unlawful. Nevertheless, Henyard bypassed the village board and moved forward unilaterally in response. The board returned to court, armed with a formal letter from the ILETS, seeking to block Burge's appointment permanently. What began as a personnel dispute has since evolved into a referendum on the health of local democracy, and Dalton critics say this isn't just mismanagement. It's a calculated power grab. The pattern is clear: allegiance over competence, obedience over merit, and the cost, they argue, is growing by the day. The consequences are real. Crime is rising. Infrastructure is crumbling. Financial oversight appears to have collapsed. The local business environment is faltering. And amid these cascading crises, residents say their voices are being ignored by an administration more focused on controlling the narrative than solving the town's problems. The more scrutiny Burge faced, the more anger it sparked. His previous tenures, already marred by lawsuits, cast serious doubts on his ability to lead a department in crisis. Henyard's unwavering support for him, despite legal warnings, community protests, and intense media attention, has led many to question not only her judgment, but also her priorities. For some, those concerns have morphed into even stronger accusations. Critics now describe Henyard's leadership style as authoritarian. Giant billboard around town bear her face, prompting some residents to call them self-promotional propaganda. Her public appearances, frequently theatrical and combative, have struck many as political theater rather than governance to them. Dalton has become a political stage, and Henyard is the lead actor in a never-ending spectacle. This focus on image and performance has pushed many residents to the breaking point. They're exhausted, disillusioned, and desperate for change. The battle ahead. Dalton at a turning point as the next mayoral election looms. Dalton finds itself at a decisive moment. Trustee Jason House has stepped forward as Henyard's primary challenger, offering a stark contrast to the current administration. His campaign platform revolves around 3 urgent promises: reform, accountability, and transparency, and the public is listening. House has pledged to clean up what he calls the mess left behind by Henyard. He vows to restore professionalism and integrity to a government he believes has lost its moral compass. His message is resonating with voters who feel abandoned by the current leadership and eager for a path forward. But Henyard isn't stepping aside. Instead, she has launched her re-election campaign with even more bravado. In a bold and polarizing move, she publicly compared herself to former President Donald Trump, framing herself as a political outsider under siege and predicting a landslide victory. Despite the scandals that have engulfed her tenure, her defiance has only deepened the rift in Dalton. The question now isn't just whether Henyard can retain her office, but whether Dalton can withstand another term under her leadership. Multiple investigations are still underway. The outcome of the Burge controversy remains unresolved. Trust in local government is at an all-time low, and the town's reputation has suffered under the national spotlight. What was once a hopeful vision for progress and reform has devolved into a bitter political battle marked by division, dysfunction, and a growing sense of betrayal. For many in Dalton, the choice in the upcoming election will be about more than policy. It will be about survival. Will Dalton find a way out of this spiral? Can its leaders rise to meet the moment and restore faith in government? Or will Henyard's legacy be one of missed opportunities, deepening mistrust and lasting turmoil? The town's future hangs in the balance.